This came out about a year ago. They need it updated again, but it's actually each one of these dots is a brewery in the U.S. And you can see like by this is a design firm back in New York that did this. It is infographics, but the darker the area, the higher density of breweries per capita. And you can see even they do it by state, and then they do it by if there's a certain area, they'll break it out. So this is like Portland, Greater Portland.
Oh, I
again,
see.
yeah.
I see.
Yeah, and so there's quite a bit out there. So the gold pins are pretty much anyone we've sold to, but I'd say half of it stays in here. The other half of it's going.
They drink a lot of beer in Wisconsin. I know
Los
that.
Angeles. Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And
happening in our facility every day.
300,000 metric tons of barley go through this production facility every year. A lot of that comes from the 200 acres surrounding the plant. It's harvested, loaded into grain elevators, and carried all the way to the top of these buildings, where it's then dropped into cleaners.
So any sticks or stones or anything like that gets cleaned out in the cleaners.
Once the barley is clean, it's transferred to this conveyor belt and is ready for phase 2. This is called the steeping process. This is the very first step after the barley has been cleaned. It's dumped into these massive tubs full of water where it soaks.
It'll stay in here for about 38 hours. We're beginning to hydrate the kernel here in this step. We watch to see when the end of the kernel starts to chit. And that's what we see here with the little white nubs on the end of the kernel.
That means the barley is ready for step 3. Now we've entered the germination phase. This is where the grain comes in this large room and sits for about 4 days. It's always 65 degrees in here. They try to keep the humidity at 100%. You can actually try the grain. It smells like cucumbers. Not much taste to it.
Here in germination, this is where we're providing lots of fresh air to the grain. And so the fresh air comes in and goes down through the germination bed.
After a few days in germination, the barley moves to the kiln, the final stop before being sent to breweries.
We'll be in the kiln for about 12 hours. After 12 hours, it'll transfer down to the lower deck of the kiln, and then we'll go from 12% moisture down to 4% moisture.
From start to finish, the entire process takes 5 to 7 days. Then some of
millet, oats, oatmeal stouts, things like that. But we do barley and wheat. And the first step is we steep it. And steep it like you would steep a tea bag. We have this giant tank out back that we fill the grain up, about 1.5 tons at a time. And we fill it up with water. The steeping process is about 48 hours. 8 hours on, 8 hours off. Because it has to. You do the 8 hours on, it takes it in, and once you take the water out, and the 8 hours off, it gets thirsty and it wants more, and then you give it the 8 hours more water, and it soaks it up. The moisture level is very important, and getting the right moisture level before it goes on the floor is paramount. So this we took out about 5 days ago. We bring the steep tank through here, we unload it on the floor. The rake. Have to have it nice and square. This is probably close to 2 tons right here. And it grows. I'm going to get an idea of what it looks like, but you know when it's good, when the acrospire, which is part of the grain. I'll get a better look at it later, but when it gets to 3/4 the length of the grain.
All people eating into that, I think they can kind of see the writing on the wall. They're not going to make the same mistake as like AB did, where AB kind of poo-pooed all these little small breweries starting up, and then pretty soon it's eaten into their market share.
Yeah, and now they got to buy them.
And I think if they're smart, the big malting companies know that could happen to them too, and they're kind of trying to do things.
Well, that was the other thing that I thought about, in that they tried to buy the channel. They'll sell the malt, but now, and the question I had for you is, can you sell your malt in their channel? In other words, is that possible? Will they?
They've like
Brewer Supply. What is the one they have?
They've picked up a couple people, but then pretty soon you start seeing rail cars of malt going into those places and getting rebagged as another malt, and certain maltsters that have been claiming they're from one state have gotten into trouble for that.
Okay, yeah.
So it's kind of dirty.
From Napa Valley. Which one? This one is.
It's Mad Fritz, and actually these guys were college roommates together. So this guy was he's still a winemaker. He's with David Arthur Vineyards down in Napa, and he also has a brewery. So he bought a small 1-ton system. So part of it, he's actually working with farmers to grow barley down in Napa Valley.
Really?
And he has a whole series, a terroir series, that he's actually malted it himself. But these are just all people that we work with and just some of the example cans. But about half of it goes down to Southern California. And this is all from one brewery, actually. It's called Brewery West. And their whole thing is about freshness. So they have these can blanks, and they get local artists, I wouldn't say local, but just really famous kind of artists to do this kind of crazy artwork. Looks like fruit, but it has a G on it. And that was historically how all beer was made without hops. Hops were just kind of one of the things that went into a mix of all sorts of different herbs and flowers that were used to bitter beer.
I see.
And then around the time of the Reformation of the church and stuff, that's where the Germans took off to get away from the Catholic Church and the Gruit tax. They started growing hops, and now that's stuck with us today. And hops have kind of become the dominant
But you've made a beer without hops.
Yeah.
How does it taste?
Amazing.
Really?
You don't need hops. That's the thing. And,
really?
No, you don't. You don't. And you can bitter with it. And mostly the reason you use hops is there's a lot of different flavors in hops now. I mean, tropical, all that kind of stuff. But initially, 2 reasons you use hops. They're an antimicrobial agent.
Okay.
And the second one is to balance the sweetness of malt. So you need kind of like you need the sweetness of the malt balanced.
Is it true that hops are a cousin of marijuana?
Yes.
I heard that.
Yeah.
So could you make beer with marijuana as a hop flavor?
You can, but then there's like legal issues
and
all sorts of stuff. But yeah, you can do that. And there's certain hop varieties that you'll get a whiff of them and it smells like someone's been token up like right next to you.